Welcome to a tag-along discussion. My name is Bilal Khan, and we're here at IlmSummit with 4 of our attendees from across the world. So we've got Jiva Akbar from the UK, Manchester, right?
That's right.
Manchester. She works with Sheikh Ahmed Sharif and Discover You, with personal development field. Then we have Amal Abdurrahman from Seattle, all the way from the West Coast. Is it true that it rains a lot there?
Yes, it does.
It's not a stereotype.
No.
Okay. And she is a social worker. Then we have Shazi Akbar, originally from Bradistan, right? Bradford, UK. Proud Paki, or Paki, or
no.
Yeah. And but currently in SoCal, and is actually a filmmaker. So, and now we also have another Abuan, and she's a nurse. Also has her own line of fitness apparel called Wisdom Clothing. If you haven't seen the video, she's doing you're the one that's doing the clean, right? Yes. So just want to say welcome to our panel. The discussion topic today got a lot of questions, especially considering today we actually closed off our session on feminism. Let's talk about the subject of feminism.
So we just had a fantastic presentation here at IlmSummit by Julie. And I was just saying to the girls, I came in with no background knowledge of feminism. It was just one of those terms, like a lot of Muslims out there, I think you just, you look at the subject and you automatically just get an uncomfortable feel. Well, I personally get an uncomfortable feeling about it, and it's like, I don't associate myself. The term Islamic feminist does not
What's uncomfortable about it?
So it's just a lack of knowledge, not knowing exactly what the movement's about, what the values are, what the principles are.
Okay.
So going through Julie's presentation, I still don't want to be associated with that term, but now at least I understand the parts of it that do fit the Islamic framework and the parts of it that I believe definitely don't. And in my eyes, what I was saying is that when you're talking about women and our rights and our principles and what we've been given, that's been given to me by Allah. So I don't need a movement to provide that for me, or to hold that narrative out there for me to have those rights. But I understand in the context that we're living in that that needs explaining to people.
Well, what about, granted, there's a lot of things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given.
Right.
Men, women, elderly children, but a lot of that is not necessarily realized due to cultural setups.
Right.
And for that reason, you'll see movements like feminism, like liberalism, things like that emerge for people to, I guess, initially get what they feel is their right.
For me, I don't see the term feminist as being a stigma. A doctor today has a different role from a doctor 20 years ago. It's just a word. But I think, like anything, like language in society evolves, equally the term evolves. I'm actually very comfortable being seen as a feminist because I've taken back my own power, both within my community and in terms of my relations externally. Recently I went to a filmmakers get-together on Sunset Boulevard. I was invited by a British producer, and it was a week after Hebdo Charlie, and nobody spoke to me. And there were a couple of Hollywood stars there as well. They looked at me constantly, but no one spoke. So I left, and I actually had a word with her about this recently, and she said, nobody meant it. And I said, well, I've never been somewhere where no one's ever spoken to me. It was clear that I didn't know anybody. And so people, I find in my industry, see the scarf before they see the human. And it's taken me a while to get over that, because I'm a human being that happens to be Muslim. Now, the upside of that was I was looking for a place to live, and I was focusing on maybe moving into the LA area. But after that happened, I went to the masjid in Anaheim, and I just cried my eyes and said, I can't go on like this. If this is my destiny, I need to be among people who are like me. And I think that was the best thing that happened to me, because that incident empowered me to define myself as Muslimah first. And maybe it was part of the qadr of making me, reassess where I was, because my original reason behind moving here was because I felt frustrated that I'm not meeting Muslim artists. I'm not vibing with artistic people.
Did you find a difference in just the way people treated you in the UK versus how they treated you here?
Definitely.
Okay.
People are a lot more open-minded. They're open to dialogue. And I find the average person on the street doesn't see the scarf, which is why the contrast was so stark for me.
Okay.
To go somewhere where they're supposed enlightened storytellers and people just saw the scarf.
I think that it's interesting when you just look at the whole concept of feminism. And with me, with the experience that I had with feminism is I was born in Somalia, but because of the civil war, my family moved to Pakistan. And it was during that time, we had the president or the prime minister was a woman. And as a young age, I grew up seeing a woman as a prime minister. At the same time, there were also Afghanis that were there. So in terms of that, having that identity of what's known as being a refugee, if the term you say, oh, you want to be empowered, to feeling like disempowered, if that's what people would think in that concept. But what's beautiful about that experience is understanding at that very moment, others might see me at that moment, oh, look at, this person that didn't have a country or no, in that sense. But our culture, the Somali culture, I know in our culture, there's like poetry. That's how people express themselves. There were powerful women that spoke about this experience. And so knowing that, coming into
you engage in some of the poetry? No.
No.
Okay.
But yeah, so having that image and then coming to the US at a young age. And again, my identity being redefined for me. Now I became, as a refugee, and you come in and then you become, and that was the first time I found out I was Black. I never knew that identity, right? So
interesting. So when you weren't in the U.S.,
yeah,
how did you see yourself?
I was Somalian living in Pakistan.
Okay.
Then I came to the U.S. I became Black or African American.
Okay.
So, and also, within that, so learning about feminism for me, the people that were historically, when you go back and you learn about person like Sanjur Truth, and I hope I'm not butchering her name, a woman who was an African American descent who. Her speech about Ain't I a Woman is talking to not all women in the world, but also talking about how she herself didn't even have rights. Women were considered as property. So, that to me was profound. So understanding the historic background of feminism, I have appreciation for that sense, but I know in terms of where I come from, the woman that I know in terms of whether it's in Pakistan, Fatima Ali Janatu, there are some women I look up to. And in each country, they will have a movement that have their own name. So I think that in a Western perspective, I understand what feminism is, and I understand with my colleagues as a social worker. I have colleagues in terms of that we worked in social justice projects that we collaborated, whether it's in education or healthcare reform or immigration reform. There are some issues that I firmly do think that we need to work together, not only as Muslims as well, and everybody. So for me, it's understanding the context and where people are coming from. And there's some things that we disagree upon, and that's fine. And there's things that, we share.
Within the same context of the idea of feminism and women empowerment and women leadership and all that, but what challenges do you see, do you think, or personally face?
I come from a family of 5 girls altogether. And so I don't like generalizing because I don't know everybody's experience, but my experience has always been just talking about my immediate family with my parents. Being a girl has never been an issue to stop us from achieving anything. Like, if anything, the cultural norm is, oh, you've got girls, how unfortunate you don't have a son, So we've always been raised not to be men, but just to be the best that we can be as a woman with our opportunities. So I've not really faced any personal struggle that I can say. But I'm pretty sure there are people that have. But just personally speaking, yeah, alhamdulillah, like the opportunities that have been presented, I've never felt I can't pursue anything because I'm a woman. I don't know.
Not even socially outside of family.
So,
or even.
Well, can I ask, what's your parents' background? Are they educated?
So yeah, my dad was educated in the UK. Mm-hmm. My mum came when she was in her late teens. So they got married pretty soon after. And mum's worked her way up. And she works, and I suppose for my community, in the small town that I live just outside of Manchester, she was one of the first active women, if you like, to go into work and stuff. The women in that community tend to stay at home with the children. So it was actually her mother and father-in-law that encouraged her to do that. So that was our family setup. So even from the community, I don't know. I have never really asked her if she's faced any backlash. If anything, I think she's inspired other people by being someone that English wasn't her first language, mm-hmm. and learning and going through courses and developing herself. But yeah, it's quite interesting to see the role that she's taken on compared to other women who are now doing the same thing. But that's very specific to my particular town. like if there's any UKers watching, and if I was to mention which town I come from, they'll understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to do that. But yeah.
I think a big stumbling block, certainly for me, is among the middle class to upper middle class, where they see you wanting to be empowered by gaining more Islamic knowledge as a step back.
Wait,
As
you see
opposed
you
to a step-
learning more as
A step back,
Okay.
as in, get with the program, get with the secular way of thinking, and you'll move forward. Whereas what they actually don't understand is, within the larger scheme of things, I'm becoming more and more empowered by knowing my history, knowing my rights as a Muslimah, because being a Muslimah is not interchangeable with being anything else for me. I was born into this, and I've decided to claim it as my right. So that's a struggle within the community to be taken seriously. I know people talk about how you do a few courses and then you think you know it all. For me, it's being able to even have a voice. Certainly, among extended family, because the notion is if you're born in the West that you can't possibly be a good Muslim. Certainly among certain families. So because it's interwoven into our culture that Islam is part of it, that's enough. You don't have to bring Islam to the table. We don't have to discuss it. And I
You
think
don't have to go beyond what's already there.
yeah,
Okay.
you just keep it to yourself.
But this is in the UK.
Yeah, this is globally wherever
okay,
my
gotcha.
relatives are, because I've kind of gravitated towards it more.
Okay.
And I do have a lot of relatives who've come from Pakistan to the US,
Okay.
and they find it very bizarre that out of everybody, on 11 children, brothers and sisters on both sides, I'm the only one who wears hijab, and the only one who actually wants to build a career impassioned by the notion of what it is to tell Muslim stories. They're kind of like, well, there's a whole world out there. If you really want to make it, then maybe keep this as a side issue. But I find that slightly odd, because it's actually a really exciting time. Because I think, just as Amal was just saying, it's often when you see who you're not that you find out who you are. And that awakening is happening in every generation. There are people who are older than me who are just waking up now. There are people who are younger than me who kind of looking, thinking in the future, maybe I will turn.
So the idea of identity really is coming through now.
Central.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
For me, I think growing up, my dad was working, and my mom was like she used to stay like a mom that would cook and everything. But when we came to America, I think that changed. And for me, I think that from a young age, just seeing injustice and oppression in that sense from a young age. And for me, I think it was my way of life just preparing me to become a social worker. In some sense when I look back about it. But coming to the U.S., everything, as a refugee, everything changes. So my dad got sick, so my mom had to work. And that was I remember thinking, oh my God, my mom's gonna work. It was just even though there was a woman president and all that stuff, when we came to America, everything changed. For me, it was just sense of understanding who I was, and seeing my mom work, and not working because of her, career, but she had to provide for the family because my dad was sick. And being, again, in another category of understanding people's struggle, like the Native Americans to the African American struggle. And so books when I read, I have, Bell Hooks to, Maya Angelou's, to all this book. It was just my teachers became my mentors, and the mentor that, kind of told me about the past history of women of color and what their experience was like. But the thing that I struggled with was the Muslim identity part. Okay, now I understood. Here I was as a woman. Here are some different women that struggled through history, what their stories were like. But during that time, September 11 didn't happen. Right. But once September 11 happened, that part of my identity now became obvious. Oh, now you're a Muslim. Before I was just a black, you could say, you just blend in because we were living in North Carolina then.
And then something we discussed, right? At times of trials, you have to stay more true to your identity, right? Now more than ever, it means so much more to really get a grasp of who you are as a Muslim woman.
Yes. And so that was the moment that I then was just wow. And that's when I started, wearing my hijab fully and really understanding that sense of, that part of my identity. But what the struggles that I face being Muslim is the question that comes, oh, you're a Muslim and you want to do social justice. So for us, I would be in a class or I'll be in circles where there are women that are feminists. They themselves define themselves as feminists, and they would say, no, you're oppressed because I'm wearing hijab. You can't possibly.
How do you respond to that? What do you say to people that say that to you?
I just say, if this is the face of an oppressed woman, bring it on.
That's a nice.
Because that's my perception of me. You know, I don't. That's them projecting onto us. And I think you to walk in a room and just assume without actually talking to a person is to label someone, and maybe they're oppressed by their ideologies. But yeah, I don't see that as an issue. I find it quite hilarious actually, because hello, you're oppressed. You poor thing, take it off and sit down. How do you know that I'm not jumping for joy inside? And it's funny that you say that it's almost like social justice cannot be synonymous with Islam.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's a real cliche.
Yeah.
There's an article that somebody sent me a while back about in the TV Times in the Sunday Times in the UK, and it was a lady wearing a niqab walking around. I think it was Bristol or somewhere, and she was talking about how she was going to faint, and it was actually a warning to me that look, forget about all this hijab business. This is how people perceive you. And the thing that struck me was the person who wrote the article, which was an adjunct to the video, had done no research on the wives of the Prophet ﷺ. Didn't understand the background to that. Sorry?
Historical context?
Yeah, the historical context of why some women wore it. And also I'd read books by, I think it's Naima Roberts on, is it My Sister's Lips? Something from my sister's lips, and where it championed women who choose to wear it, and they were totally disregarded. It was just somebody. It's like asking someone to fast just for the sake of it. There's no higher vision. There's no goal at the end of it. If you're wandering around aimlessly and goallessly, of course you're going to be in the moment like an animal in that chain reaction. There was no intellect brought into the equation. So I found that quite patronizing, because if you're going to put something out into the media, do your homework first. Because yes, logically, if you put something on that's going to cover your face, you're going to be hot. But the question is the big why. Why are you doing it? And how people say that how can you fast all day? Some people fasting 21 hours a day. You can do anything if you put your mind to it. And it's amazing training.
We're alive, don't worry.
Yeah. And it's amazing how much you get done in that time, because you just focus.
Oh, yeah.
You can feel your vibration change mentally. Yeah, it's amazing.
True.
You become so productive because it's about intention. It's the power of intention, and that side of things, Wayne Dyer, all these New Age people talk about intention.
Right.
Well, ask us what our intentions are. Don't just think we're a piece of meat with a piece of cloth.
Yeah.
And it's often that aspect of the choice and the intention are missing, that we can't make our own choices and we can't possibly have an intention. And I find that synonymous with supposedly overcloaking ourselves. And that ties in with what you were saying about how can a person be socially just and be a Muslim?
Yeah.
The following up on that is how can you be human and be Muslim?
Well, when did you come to New York?
2 years ago.
2 years ago, okay. The reason I'm asking this is because, are you familiar with the whole Ground Zero Mosque thing that happened?
Yes.
Okay, so I was actually working on that project when it was going down. One of the things that we found that was interesting was that all the people that are protesting, they're not even from New York. Right, so New Yorkers wouldn't do that because they're there's been a mosque there for the last 30 years. It's just a different location now.
Right.
So now the stereotype of folks in the Northeast is that you got everybody else is just racist. So being from Cleveland, what was the difference in reception of who you are, your identity, and did you find it struggles to be different? More or less challenging, or what?
Well, actually, for me, before I guess I became religious, I kind of felt like I fit in the mold of what everybody else expected me to be, which is the stereotypical woman. Like, this is your idea of beauty. This is what this is the path that you're supposed to lead as an American woman, seeking education and things like that. And I didn't really know who I was until I found Islam. And so that after I became more religious and started covering myself, I actually felt like I had an identity and I was a proud Muslim woman. And for me, that also had a huge impact on what I had to go through culturally. Because for me, my biggest struggle, I guess I was a feminist without really knowing I was a feminist. Because I know with my cultural background, I know so many girls who struggle because of the parents who come from, overseas. That the expectation culturally that we just are raised to be good daughters, don't do anything bad, don't do anything to shame the family. A lot of traditional stuff, and cultural things impacting us. And that even if we seek out an education, even if we do things in the community, we're still expected to get married. And like there's this saying in my culture, in my Palestine, that she can get the degree, but she's gonna end up with the broom. Yeah, and that was like always like, wow, that actually really hurt so bad, because we take the time to seek out this education and try to do something impactful with our lives and our family in the future, inshallah. And so for me, I felt like I had to just be that change silently, because I've always felt like I didn't really have to raise my voice and be that activist. I felt like just being someone who's a good Muslim and being active in the community, my actions will reflect that.
So one of the things that you started recently is the whole Jism fitness clothing line, right?
Yeah.
Like it's basically a bunch of ninjas lifting barbell weights over their heads. So at least that's the perception that you've established very well, which I think is fantastic, right? And it's like, but I guess one of the questions is, what kind of inspired that?
What inspired it was just for me, like the personal struggle that I felt like I need some workout clothes, just something as simple as that. And I feel like, the mainstream clothing industry just didn't cater to our needs. Like if I can name drop Nike, Adidas, and all these companies. And so I felt like, why do I have to go in the men's section, buy an extra large shirt to just, fulfill my fitness needs? It's enough that we kind of have to be forced to work out in mixed gyms, and then I can't even wear the clothes that I need to wear to feel like I'm fulfilling my religious obligations. Right. And so I'm like, why don't I just do something about it? I'm not a filmmaker. I don't really know anything about that kind of stuff. All I know is that when I watch like a YouTube video or something on TV, like a commercial, I know that it has a theme. And I wanted the underlying theme to be something very Islamic without it screaming Islam, Muslim, Muslim, Muslim. So I decided to put like a ninja mask on, and that kind of related to the Muslim mask, which I've gotten so much feedback asking me, is this a niqabi like fitness mask? I'm like, no, it's not a niqabi fitness mask. It was just
one thought that had in my mind, like, wait, you guys like the VO2 type.
Yes, it's not that at all. No, yeah.
But you guys should definitely do one with those.
Yeah, I actually thought about that, but they're actually kind of expensive. So
just for the promotion, because people buy those VO2 masks for increasing lung capacity anyway.
It's
right?
like you guys know what that is? It's like a mask you wear that
it's a
kind of
mask. That's what it is.
Simulates like running around in like Mount Everest, on the top of Mount Everest, like your oxygen levels decrease. I know that sisters personally, like in the New York area, who take fitness serious, we're also struggling. So I decided to do something about it. But I really wanted to, I guess, take Islam and really incorporate it into it, and just really be empowered by the Muslim identity without saying, we're Muslim, we're Muslim, we're Muslim. And so I just wanted that to speak silently.
In regards to leadership, I guess, especially this is to, all of my Muslim sisters. And actually before I decided to come to IlmSummit, it was part of like initiative in Seattle. We were looking at different ways that, we can promote ilm. I know that when I was going to school, we tend to think about once I finish school, then I'll focus on deen. But in ways that, while you're going to school, if you can also balance those two, you can be learning ilm and you can be also going to school at the same time. And the reason why I say that is when I was doing my social work and social justice work, it really, you think that we don't have people that, inspirational people in our history that also made difference, women and men. And so when you're in schools, many times you will never know those stories. But if you seek ilm and if you learn about your identity, that not only empowers you in a way that it inspires you to even do lots of good things in the world, but also it's our duty to talk about and revive those names. And so that's something that I really regret. And I wish I knew a lot of the people in our in Islamic history, that I wish I brought that in the class and I talked about it when different concepts were mentioning. So that's, yeah. So I really do hope that, and I really urge, everybody to don't wait till you finish school. You can start it now. It's really amazing, and it really uplifts you in a way that no one has to define you. If you're, you're a Muslimah, that's alhamdulillah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us women our, rights, and in a way, you are strong, beautiful, and, you can change the world as long as you know who you are. Because once someone defines you, then you become that person. And so that's my seriously generous advice, that if anybody is going into that field of social justice, that you're not only going to the movements, but you're also telling people about Islam in a way that, about our leaders and about our activists that, made change in the world.
What is the Muslim woman identity? What would you advise for the women who are seeking to discover their own version of that?
My upbringing was quite unusual because my father was very anti-Islamic and very anti-cultural as well. So I was brought up in a household where I wasn't allowed to pray, I wasn't allowed to speak Urdu or Punjabi, and I wasn't allowed to wear anything that was ethnic. His reasoning behind it was because he wanted to integrate me into Western society. And unfortunately, I was extremely spiritual from a very young age. I used to secretly, my mother was from a totally different family. It was an arranged marriage. So she would bring me books on Islamic historical figures. And it was something I had to suppress. I couldn't show it because I was scared that he would be angry. So I grew up with everything percolating within me without me being able to have a voice. So it's kind of in contradiction to Amel's upbringing, where the force was outside of the home. This was inside the home. And I actually felt more comfortable outside because I was quite good at school. So teachers and kids were interested in my opinions. And I felt actually quite free expressing the fact that, hey, my hero is Abu Bakr Siddiq. So it was a very bizarre bubble in which I grew up, where the freedom wasn't at home for me, but it was outside. And I think things do, there is a qadr to everything. And I would say that, first of all, there's no age to learn. If people do get swept away by the tides of society, you can come back in with that tide. And I think you have to be real with your strengths and your limitations, and you define yourself, your learning path, link it to the secular world as well. Learn as much as you can about Islam and other things that interest you, because we are actually very universally connected. And I think the ultimate Muslimite is someone who can sit down with someone who is supposedly a far cry from everything that you are and find that connection. It's very easy to be among your own and be in that comfort zone, but that's not a test. That struggle for me, I speak Urdu and Punjabi. When I go to Pakistan, people don't believe I've ever been outside the country. I'm proudly a Muslim. But I thank my dad for that now, because I wouldn't be a filmmaker if it wasn't for him. Because I'd be quite happy to just be married, look after my kids, just keep it, just be part of the next generation. That was meant to happen for me to be who I am. And I think it's coming to terms with your qadr. Whatever happens to you, there's khair in it. Use it to your advantage.
I feel like it's life experience and education, right? It's nothing's ever been like a pin drop moment for me. It's just been a continual development. So I'm invested in my own education, whether that be going through the schooling system at university and finding a certain niche that I'm interested in, or whether that be with my Islamic education through coming to things like IlmSummit or other education establishments. So it's never been like a defining moment. It's just been a gradual progression, and I'm gonna continue to do that and still find what my identity is. But for somebody who's looking to do that, then they just need to go out and not be afraid to do that. Like, I feel like some people are sat in their rooms trying to figure out their lives but not actually doing anything about it, right? So just go out, speak to people, go to places, ask questions, ask advice in your locality, people that you're influenced by, and they'll find their identity, inshallah. And I mean, as long as you've got a good framework, as a family that you can rely on, or friends, or your networks, you've got a support system there. Like, you don't have to do it alone. There's so many avenues for people to help you. Like you mentioned, how we're all universally connected. We're hearing so many stories of people finding like the best of soulmates from across the world, and that being the thing to establish their identity in life and what they want to achieve, and being inspired by other women or other Muslims or other non-Muslims.
You know what? I'd made a conscious decision because I'd heard about AlMaghrib for a while, and I sort of said, when I have time, I'd gone to certain exhibitions, and then I just made this decision. Look, it's not about when I have time. This has to come first, and everything else has to come second. It's almost like cleaning out your closets, cleaning out your home, spring cleaning. You have to empty out everything that is, on the list of priorities. What's important, what's desirable, what could be done later. If you make your soul search, your quest for your own answers, your priority, you will be amazed. It's true that when you take one step towards Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes 10 steps towards you. I've experienced that in my own life.
So
Once you make that decision, which is the hardest thing to do, you watch what happens.
That for me, that moment for me growing up, that was never defined by me being a woman or a girl. It was just me wanting to be a Muslim. Like that was me finding my religion, finding my belief. So the whole being a woman and issues and challenges, that never came into it. That's what I meant by it's just been a gradual progression. And so for you might have been more of a defining moment as a woman and putting the hijab on and the struggles you had internally. For us, that was just natural progression.
I think mine was a natural progression as well.
Yeah.
For me, finding myself was actually finding myself isolated,
Right.
having personal conversations with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, nobody else there, just me and Allah, and just developing that connection through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not being afraid to become who I was discovering myself to be. And with that, I discovered myself to be a Muslim. And with that, I discovered myself to be a woman. I never really thought about these things. And then once I kind of gained strength in those identities, I was able to engage in my with my coworkers.
Right.
And if they did something or said something that I wasn't really like, it wasn't Islamically like something I agreed with, I was still strong enough to stand and say that this is the person who I am, and that's okay if I'm different than them.
No, I definitely. I mean, it's just, and I really feel so blessed right now to be, sitting amongst you. And I think that has been my experience in IlmSummit. Honestly, it has been a truly beautiful experience. And the reason being is I think that as Muslims, as a Muslim woman, I think that I always knew I was Muslim because my family was Muslim. I mean, but it was like the moment that I decided that I wanted to be a Muslim. I think the moment I wanted to be Muslim is when I felt even comfortable amongst Muslims. It's not that before I would run away from Muslims, but I would be in different protests and in terms of activism and doing all this work. And I would be amongst Muslims, but I didn't know what being Muslim was like internally. And once I decided to be Muslim, I'm Muslim, I understood who I was. So the more I got to know about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the more I found out who I really was. And so that is the beauty of Islam and understanding your creator and your Lord, is that once you know him, you get to know yourself. If you look at other books and different people and, people define you, you keep on like, you for a moment you think like, yes, this is me,
fit in their mold,
right? But there's just like, you will see how you don't fit in that mold. And so for me, alhamdulillah, and I pray that all of us find, because all of us are in a journey,
Right.
and I'm really, so for me being coming to IlmSummit was sort of like that moment of like finally being amongst Muslims and finally being in the same frequency, and that also learning about my deen. And so that was really, and I'm so happy and blessed that I got to not only hear your stories as well, but being amongst strong women. So alhamdulillah.
So folks, that was the conclusion of our tag along with our sisters here. I am so tired right now.
We told you, we'll do it.
I don't want to say draining or exhausting, but
It's intense.
it's intensive.
Yeah.
It's been an intensive experience. What do you feel that are your top challenges being a Muslim woman and growing up in the quote-unquote West? As well as have you found struggles, or rather, what have you found to be the greatest contributor to discovering your identity as a Muslim woman? Let me know in the comments below. Overview, we had Nida Abu. Yeah. I'm totally tongue-tied right now. Nida Abu, she's a nurse. It's you and your husband, right? With Jism? Or is it just you?
It's me, but
Okay.
he supports me 100% everything I do.
It's her husband's cheerleader. With Fitness Apparel from New York, we have Shazia Iqbal, really from Bradford, UK, Bradistan, and now in SoCal. Filmmaker, we've got AlMaghrib Rahman from Seattle, social worker, and Jiva Akbar from the UK, Manchester.
Yeah.
And work with discovery personal development.
Emphasizing that Manchester.
You ever see any of us? Don't be shy. Say hi. Assalamu alaikum.